Hi, Year 11. Well, not the usual way I would put forward a workshop. This time we're going to do this a little bit differently. At times I'm going to ask you to pause this video and to go and add your thoughts and ideas to the forums. So the topic today we're looking at is why modify markets and the importance of governments in intervening in our economy. The government may seek to regulate economic activity. So this means they're intervening, okay, in the operation of price mechanism, supply and demand, market equilibrium, and circular flow, money flowing around the economy. My question to you is why? Why do governments seek to regulate their economic activity? Pause the video and go and put your responses into the forum. Have a read of what others have said and continue the conversation forward. So in Unit 2, we've looked a lot at the consumer and the role of the consumer in the markets. And we started off by looking at this from the point of view of the rational consumer. And we know the rational consumer doesn't exist. We understand that. And we also know that the rational consumer is one that makes decisions with all information available. So with this in mind, when we're looking at the market, at the end of the day, the consumer is sovereign, meaning that they have control. They are the ones that make the decisions. Okay, and this came from Adam Smith, and I don't know if you remember back to the beginning of 10.5 when we looked at some of the key economists that exist. Adam Smith suggested that everyone in society is better off if the government doesn't control the economy. Okay, he had this idea of that magic hand that just helped consumers to make decisions based on what was best for the whole. Okay, this idea of personal incentive and profit motive automatically guides everyone, that invisible hand guiding everyone to buy and sell exactly what's required in society. And as a result, why do governments need to intervene? If the economy is working in a free market, why would they need to intervene? Now, society has this goal that markets need to work efficiency. And remember when we looked at efficiency earlier this term, okay, the 5 efficiencies. You should know what they are, okay? And to work efficiently, depending on which one you decide to use, and effectively, we need to achieve this idea of optimum allocation of resources and socially desirable outcomes. And that's what we've been looking at over the last little while. We've been looking at all these ways markets fail, okay? And how can we achieve the optimal allocation of resources, okay? So we've looked at lots and lots of ways markets fail, okay? 21 of them to be exact. Okay, so how do we correct market failure when there are so many different types? Governments try to do this by reducing the likelihood of those things occurring, the likelihood of markets failing. And what they try to do is improve the socially desirable outcomes for everyone. And they either do this by regulating a market or deregulating a market. So regulating a market's putting controls in place, deregulating a market is taking those controls away. Okay, but the challenge for government is deciding, do we live with some of these market failures or do we not live with some of these market failures? We have to make a choice to intervene and improve or let the market sort it out itself. And that obviously comes with a lot of consequences. And some of the things that we need to think about, of course, is our externalities of consumption, especially in terms, at least the government needs to really think about things like cigarettes, alcohol, poker machines, healthcare, education. So these are positive externalities. Sometimes they can be negative externalities as well. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to tell me how and why do governments intervene? Okay, you know some of these answers already. So how and why do governments intervene? Having a brainstorm of your ideas, here are some of them. They regulate. They provide public goods. Yep, we know this. We've looked at some of these goods that they provide. They deregulate, meaning they take some of the. So the next few slides are looking at why governments intervene. And the first reason is they want to improve distribution of income and wealth. Okay, they want to make their citizens more wealthy and they want to improve and have a equal distribution of income or a more equal distribution of income across society. So they seek to intervene and modify markets to reduce the inequality in personal wealth and income among a population. So some ways of doing this are sometimes where private goods are traded, there'll be a population who is unable or unwilling to pay what the market price is. They can't afford it, essentially. So we've also got to look at the control and ownership of the factors of production, because of course this influences the distribution of income and wealth. Who owns what is the first sign of wealth. So looking at how and why different people control those factors of production. It's looking at things like which countries own parts of our land and that sort of thing. It also looks at who owns the companies, how much of the company do they own. Labour, of course, is traded in accordance with market price mechanism principles. So supply and demand works for labour just as it works for products. And part of that is looking at making sure people are getting paid a fair amount of money. Okay, and that's where minimum wage comes into play. Looking at household expenditure and how households participate in the goods and services market. And of course, that's limited by how much income they can generate from their labour. Okay, people have a set amount of money that they earn, and that in itself will affect how much that they can spend and invest and improve their income and wealth. Okay, and some of the ways the government can intervene in this section. How do you think? How do you think that they can intervene? Pause the video for me and answer in the forums. Don't forget to continue to talk with other people as they put their ideas forward. So now that you've had a bit of a brainstorm, governments can intervene by using wages policy. So this is your minimum wage. This is the requirements for working. Fiscal policy, the spending of government money, taxes. So obviously this can be done through welfare payments. This can be done through reducing or increasing the income tax rate. The second reason governments intervene is they want to improve economic growth. This is looking at how much the economy produces in a year. And of course, how much income can we generate from that? So governments seek to intervene to ensure that there's sustainable economic growth. And we know that sustainable economic growth is about 2 to 3%, because this helps to improve the living standards of the population. So the governments do this by monitoring the level of economic activities. And of course, those of you who did 10.0 would remember we looked at different economic indicators. If you haven't done that, don't stress. We do come back and look at it. But to give you a basic idea, economic indicators are things that tell us how the economy is performing. Things like economic growth, unemployment, inflation, trade with other countries. These are just some of the indicators. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ways to ascertain how an economy is performing, and we're going to look at those along the way and in the journey all the way to the end of year 12. So it's just something we're going to build on slowly over that time. In a mixed economy like Australia, an unregulated market can potentially be unstable, depending, of course, on the market that we're looking at. Okay. That being said, they can also be stable if it is something that is an everyday item or something that people can't live without. So controlling the market and things like unemployment and inflation becomes quite important. Okay, and then GDP is another one that we can seek to control through intervention. So, how do governments intervene? Pause the video and answer the question in the forum. Some of the ways governments can intervene is using fiscal policy, changing taxation levels, changing the amount of government spending, because obviously the more the government spends, the more that, economic growth will increase. Same with reducing taxes. The more we reduce taxes, the more disposable income people have, and therefore being able to, improve economic growth. Monetary policy. Monetary policy looks at interest rates and the changing of interest rates and the money supply in the economy. So if you think about improving economic growth, monetary policy can be done by reducing interest rates, because this, of course, reduces the amount of disposable income people have, and they can then improve their situation as well. That's all for this workshop. Hopefully you've learnt lots and you've taken lots of notes. I look forward to working with you soon.